Hey there, this is Renessa Boley Layne, and welcome to another conversation around creating your perfect work. If you follow me, you know that I am all about equipping women to discover, design, and get highly paid to do work they love, whether that means radically changing careers, launching a business, or bringing your big idea to life. I am so excited about today's conversation because we are going to talk about passion and purpose and how you get clear on what that looks like for you, how it begins to integrate into your quote unquote perfect work, how you can begin to think about monetizing it, all of that good stuff. I'm so excited. It's going to be juicy. It's going to be juicy. And I am sharing the platform with a dear, 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 dear friend. Jill Stratton is the Associate Dean for Undergraduate Residential Learning at the Washington University in St. Louis.
Correct.
And I just can't say, I don't have enough time to say how much I respect this woman and how thrilled I am that she graciously agreed to join me in this conversation. But what you're going to learn about Jill, even as we pitch and catch, you know, on this recording, she is the billboard for passion and joy in her work. In fact, her students have dubbed her the Dean of Joy.
Yes.
And you're gonna have to tell us how that came to be.
Yes.
But you're just gonna learn a lot from Jill. But this conversation is gonna be a little bit different because Jill is actually going to interview me. We've got across this series so many incredible thought leaders who are going to talk about how you become a thought leader of your own, how you can get highly paid, you know, doing work that you love, how you need to show up in the world, and you know, all of that. I, however, am brilliant at helping you figure out what the heck you're supposed to do with your life, whether it's a career or business. I am brilliant at helping folks figure out what they were born to do and really getting out there and contributing to the world in a big and a meaningful way. And so Jill is actually going to pick my brain a little bit, and we're going to kind of pitch and catch. And my hope is that you'll walk away understanding how you can begin to put these pieces together for yourself. But before I get into, you know, all the things I'm going to talk about, I want to just welcome Jill.
Oh my goodness, thank you.
Give you a moment, introduce yourself, tell us
Yes.
a little bit about who you are. But guys, this is going to be fun.
Well, Renessa, thank you so much. It is a joy to be here. Thank you. We met a few years ago in California at a leadership conference, and you inspire me with your passion and your brilliance. And so again, thank you. It's an honor and a joy to be here. Speaking of joy, I'm at Washington University in St. Louis, and a few years ago, the students were trying to introduce me. They were so sweet. They were trying to be formal. And sometimes in academia, we have these really long titles that nobody can remember.
Yeah.
And so they're like, this is Dean Stratton. She's the Dean of Joy. And so I have adopted that title. Thank you, WashU students. And it is, again, I teach leadership and psychology at Washington University in St. Louis.
Yep.
And I love talking with people about their passions, what brings them alive in this world. And so, again, it's an honor to be here, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, this is gonna be awesome. So here's the deal. I'm gonna give you, just throw out a golden nugget to folks that are listening, because oftentimes people will come to me and they're like, I don't really know, you know, what I want to do next. They may have spent 10, 15 years going in a certain direction in their career, and they're trying to, you know, figure out what's next. And often they'll come and they'll say, well, I'm confused. And what I have learned over time is that I've yet to meet any woman that's actually confused. Sometimes we just don't know what questions to ask. We don't know the right questions to ask. And then other times we're afraid of the answers to those questions. Like we know the answer, but the answer is going to, you know, force us to step up in a way that we are uncomfortable with, or it's going to challenge some of our limiting beliefs or what have you. And so I'm just going to lay it out for you. And this is a writer downer if you're listening in. If you are looking to create your perfect work, there are 4 questions that you need to answer. And if you're able to answer those 4 questions authentically, it's a wrap. You will be doing work that you love, and you will be getting highly paid for it. It's a wrap. Those 4 questions are: what do you do best? What do you enjoy most? What's your story? And what's the market willing to pay for? On my conversation with Jill, we're actually not going to talk about those questions. We're going to talk about the questions before those questions, because those are simple. Like literally, once we nail that, it's a done deal. But it's very hard oftentimes for us to answer those questions authentically. And we've got lots of fears and there's lots of layers and all of that. So this conversation is all about unpacking those layers. And what questions do we need to ask of ourselves that will then point us to the answers to our sweet spot questions, if that makes sense, right? So it's the questions before the question, so to speak. And so in this conversation, we're going to help folks to start to distinguish between purpose and mission. Those two things are actually not the same thing. There's a distinction between the two. We're going to talk about that. So we're going to distinguish between purpose, mission, and hobbies. So a lot of us have things that we are passionate about, and they are meant to be hobbies. They're not meant to be monetized. They're not meant to, I loved interior design and still love interior design. And my husband and I will sit down and watch HGTV till the cows come home. I actually even went to interior design school at night while I was working my corporate job. And what I learned in interior design school is that interior design is going to be a hobby. And so we're going to help you with some of these questions to kind of be able to parcel some of that out, so that you can begin to unpack the layers of yourself and start making some decisions around what perfect work looks like for you. Cool? So I'm going to pitch it back to Jill. Because I handpicked Jill for this conversation for a reason. And again, I didn't know she was the Dean of Joy, but I'm going to roll with that because it's true. But tell me why this conversation and the questions that you're even going to ask are so near and dear and critical from your perspective.
So one of my research areas, Renessa, is emotional intelligence and leadership and self-awareness. And for me, it's really important to live my life with intention and pay attention to what matters. Yep. And then I teach and advise and mentor a lot of young adults. And I think it's really important to walk the walk, walk the talk, just like you're doing actually in this interview. You're putting yourself in that space and sharing some vulnerability about what brings you alive. Yep. And I loved what you said about that we know the answers within. And I think it's asking our questions and living into the answers, which is that great Rilke quote. And for me, this work is hard work, but it's also heart work. Yeah. It's both and I love that. And sometimes, like you said before, we're afraid of the answers because that requires us to step forward into our passion, into our leadership. Yeah. And it requires us to maybe make some changes in our lives. Yeah. It requires some vulnerability. So I loved what you said about we know the answers within. Yeah. And for me, I love seeing these aha moments, or I like to call them cranial fireworks, when students, young people, old people, all people, it's like they come alive because they're finally tapping into what brings them alive. And here's the thing, Renessa, the world needs what people have inside them. Yeah. And so I love the work that you're doing to bring that out. And I'm so glad that you're on this planet.
Yay. Awesome. So let's get cracking.
Yeah, let's do it.
I don't know what Jill's going to ask exactly.
Yeah.
So we're going to have some candid moments here, but I think it's going to be a great pitch and catch, and you're gonna walk away with some really, really cool stuff. So
right. And again, so I'm going to throw this one out there, and it comes from a Howard Thurman quote. And Howard Thurman says, he basically says, don't like. What brings you alive is his basic gist. So my question to you, it's a variation on one of the questions you ask in your program. What brings you alive? What brings you joy and passion? When you think about your work in the world, what brings you most alive?
Oh my gosh. What brings me alive is this idea of, here's my purpose. What I discovered over time was that my purpose is to reflect God's dazzling abundance. Because I believe that life is very abundant. And I don't want people to get caught up in God and religion and that. It doesn't matter at this stage what your belief system is for the purpose of this conversation. But for me, my purpose was to reflect God's dazzling abundance. And to give others the faith, the resources, and the love to do the same. Like, I think abundance begets abundance. And the biggest place that I experienced scarcity for myself was in my work. Because I was in the fast lane going in the wrong direction in my career from the very beginning. So like Jill talks about how she, in her work with her students, she really helps them to do this kind of self-reflection. I didn't get that in college. I went out to be an engineer because I was good at math and I was good at science, even though I hated math and I hated science. But I was Black, I was a woman before, STEM and diversity and inclusion were things. And my mentor said, this is the direction that you're to go. And so I went there wholeheartedly and I achieved, right? But it was a really hard road because it wasn't my natural inclination. It wasn't my natural brilliance. And I suffered a lot through that. And so even though I believed I could be anything I wanted to be, it was like 5 things. I could be a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, whatever. So there was a scarcity in terms of what I thought was possible in terms of the vitality and energy and all of that. So while my purpose was about abundance, my mission became, I don't want another woman to go through years. I mean, I was 10, 15 years in the wrong direction. I don't want another woman to go through that. And so my mission became, or to help other women discover, design, and get highly paid to do work they love. And I do that for college students. That's how Jill and I first met. We were both speakers at a college leadership conference. I do it, have a real heart for women who are mid-career and in leadership roles, because we're paying such a hefty price in terms of our health and, our sanity and relationships and all of that. And so it makes me come alive when people find the thing that they're supposed to do in the world and they go out there and they're contributing to the world, because when you're a force for good, like, just magic happens and it impacts your marriage and your parenting and your friendships. Like, I see the ripple effect of having an abundant work life. And it fires me up when people are able to get beyond all the crap as to why they can't do it, get clear, and then go out there and crank. So that's what fires me up.
Yeah, and I've seen you fired up. I mean, you're fired up now, even talking about it, but I've seen you in front of college students speaking that, and they really resonate with that. So the Howard Thurman quote is, don't ask what the world needs. Ask what brings you alive and go do that, because what the world needs is people who have come alive. Yeah. And you are on a mission to help people come alive. So speaking of college students, and so I work with college students, and I'm thinking about, let me ask you this question. Can you think back to when you were in college yourself, when you were a young adult? Would you do anything? Obviously, you've written a whole book about this, about being in the fast lane. But talk about maybe words of wisdom that you would share with your 21-year-old self now, from yourself now, or any changes you might have made when you were, or maybe like you had wished a mentor had spoken with you. Any words of wisdom for especially that young adult age?
Yeah. I would say, pay attention to the passion. Like, pay attention to the fire, right? Because we all get fired up about things and then we retract it on other things, right? And for a lot of us, we get caught up in what we should be, or what makes sense, or what's logical, right? And there's a place for logic and there's a place for being very strategic and deliberate. There's a place for that. But there's something to be said about, how do I feel about this? What am I naturally drawn to? What just fires me up? Because it's a glimpse of where you're supposed to shine in the world. And if you can find out where you're supposed to shine, then you can figure out how to monetize that light. Because the world will pay for everything, like everything. I mean, from Pee Wee Herman, for those of you who are old enough to remember Pee Wee Herman, to, baking cupcakes on TV. Like, the world will pay to marijuana. The world will pay for everything, right? And so it's a matter of really paying attention to that. And when I was young, I knew from the age I was 17, and I was doing my first internship at a technology company in California, I knew I hated it. I knew. But I also knew that a mentor had said, just sacrifice 6 years, just sacrifice 6 years, and you'll get all better. And I put my head down and I said, that's how I'm going to do it. And a lot of us can put our heads, put our nose to the grind and sacrifice, but there's no gold medal for suffering, not when it comes to purpose. There's just no gold medal for that.
Right.
And so I want to add this, that the questions that Jill are asking, the questions that Jill's asking me, these are the questions to ask yourself. What brings you alive? The question to ask yourself. This is a question my clients come in, we're asking them all the time. What would you tell the 18 to 21-year-old version of yourself as well? Because there's a wisdom in that conversation. And the reason why that question is important is because the advice that we give our 18 to 21-year-old self is it lends to our regrets. It's a symbol of what are the things that I might regret. Like for me, I regret that I didn't pay attention to the fire in my belly. I wasted years stuff I wasn't supposed to do, or just wasted my talent and my energy. And so sometimes when we get the regret, the mind plays a trick on us and says, well, it's too late for you to change that. Like it's too late. When in actuality, your answer to that question, just like my answer to my question, is telling you exactly the action that you need to take today that then changes your circumstance. So for me, my compass now becomes, how do I feel about this? Does this really light me up? Am I going to step on this stage, or I'm going to take on this project, or I'm going to take on this client? How do I feel about this? And so it's not too late. Whatever your answer is to that question is telling you what to do next and what to shift, what mindset to shift, what action to take, all of that. So it's not just Jill asking me the question so you hear it from my perspective. These are the questions that you want to be writing down for yourself, because those are glimpses to what perfect work looks like for you.
Yeah, and one of the words that you used that I picked up on was this word called should. And, what should I do? And I think there's a lot of people that, whether it's society, our family, the things we should do. I had a student recently, and she said, Dean Stratton, should I be pre-med? So, and I said, well,
they should.
Should. I said, so I asked her, I said, are you wanting to be a doctor? She said, no. Not really. I said, no, you're good. but the thing was, she thought that being a doctor, that's something, that would be that external success. Yeah. And also, I love what you said about, Renessa, paying attention to your inner gut, your heart. Yep. Oftentimes, I see people chasing external dreams. And I like when they chase their internal dreams. And those questions that you're asking people, the people you work with, clients, other people that you care about, people at your presentations, those are really powerful questions. And I think, and I know you have a whole series on this, and so I love it, and I think it's important to not think about what the shoulds are in our lives, but what we want to do. And then the other thing, when your mentor said, just 6 years, just dive into this, it'll be okay, suck it up. That's a trap.
Yeah,
I often,
I love her. I love her.
So like a student, I'm going to be a lawyer. I'm going to be a corporate lawyer for 10 years, and then I'm going to go do pro bono work and be a public.
What I really want to do.
What I really want to do. And I said, that's a trap. So I think asking those questions now and continue. These questions are continual. They're not just a one-shot deal. So I love the questions that you're asking. Okay, so let's keep on with these questions. So let me ask you this one. At the end of your life, it's one of those things in our society that we often, we need to be in present moment. I think that's important. Yep. But we think about our legacy. Yeah. How do we want to be remembered? So, for me, it's like, on my tombstone, they're not going to say, Jill Stratton, PhD. This was her, she made a 3.7 in college. I don't think that's going to be on my tombstone. Yeah. But thinking about how you want to be remembered, the mark, the contribution, what do you want to make in this world? And so that's my question to you. It's a big question, but I also think it's a really, really powerful question.
It is. For me, I want to have freed people. Wow. Like to free them to be all that they were designed to be. Like, I don't want folks to have left anything on the court when it was all said and done. That you did every dream that came to mind, every moment of contribution, every sense of meaning. Yeah. I want folks to design a life that they love. And it can, and what you love and what that life looks like for you may be radically different than how it looks like for me. But when it's all said and done, I want you to have the resources, the mindset, the freedom, and the abundance to be able to be like, I'm going to live my life and I'm going to love it. I mean, I love to see people. There's this quote by St. Ignatius, and it says that the glory of God is man fully alive. And when I was at the depths of kind of hating my work, and I had all kinds of digestive disorders and chronic fatigue, and there was a lot going on. I read a book. It was a book by John Eldridge, and in that book was this quote that the glory of God was man fully alive. And the last thing I felt was alive. And so it became, for me, I want people to have said, she equipped me to get my life back. She allowed, she allowed me to design a life that I loved and to live it. And whatever impact that has on your kids and your spouse and your this and like that's all the ripple effect, and that's all gravy. But that's what I want to be known for, as someone who just freed people and became the catalyst for them jumping on the train and creating the life that they were meant to have. Yeah. Because I think we all, will be disappointed. Not all. Some of us will be disappointed when, at the end of time, when you figure out, man, this is what was at my disposal. This is what could have been. I don't want anybody having could have beens if they had some interaction with me. And so. Yeah.
I love that. No, I love it. There's a great book by Parker Palmer. I think I mentioned this to you when we were on the phone. Yeah. It's called Let Your Life Speak. And it's this whole idea that having with our mission, our purpose, our calling come through us, and it's different, like you said, for each person. Yeah. But the whole idea to get to the end of your life and go, oh, I missed it. So you're helping people identify that and bringing and there's another great quote that I like by Frederick Buechner. He says, when your great passion meets the world's great need, that's when you come alive. Yes. So it's like, oh, that's the aliveness. And so one of the other questions I like that you have in your reflective questions.
Can I interject real quick?
Yes, please.
Because I want to remind folks as you're listening, like these are my answers. These are like, no one's asked me these questions. I ask other people these questions. What am I going to say? But I want to bring the point home. Yeah. The same question that she asked of me, this is the question that you ask of yourself, or you have someone else ask you. Right? So if you were going to receive the legendary Woman of the Year award or whatever, at the end of your life, what would it be for? Like the question speaks to purpose, and it speaks, like Jill said, it speaks to legacy, because we can get caught up in the day-to-day of what we do, but when you understand the overarching purpose, like what am I about? It gives you confidence. And that confidence becomes a fuel to step forward. It becomes a fuel to get resourceful. It becomes a fuel to figure stuff out. It becomes the fuel to be able to stand in uncomfortable places, right? Because it's about something bigger than you. And everybody's got a purpose. Everybody's got something that they're like, man, this is what I want my life to mean. And this is what I want it to be about. And so as you hear my answers, think about it for yourself, because once the purpose becomes clear, then this is the mountain I was born to climb. Because doing this work is not easy work, right? But I'm willing to go through the challenge because I'm like, somebody is about to find their thing, and somebody's going to go out there and do something big. Like they're going to do something meaningful if I'm willing to step through. And so for you, make sure you're asking yourselves the same questions. Fair?
Fair. And also just back to that, it's hard work. It's not easy work, and it's hard work. But there's so much joy that comes from bringing that into the world. And nobody is served by you playing small.
Nope.
Nobody's served. The world isn't served. You're not served. So I love that, what you're asking people to come forward in their strengths and to play big and with abundance. And it doesn't mean that it won't be scary. And the thing is, sometimes what scares us, it matters. And and it doesn't mean that it matters to us. It doesn't mean that you don't have any fear, because we all have fear, but it means that you're willing to step through that fear into your brilliance, and you're helping people do that. So that's great. So one of the things, another question I really liked that you had was, what do people thank you for? So this whole idea of it, when they look at you and say, thank you so much. And sometimes, and again, you and I've talked about it a little bit, we sometimes take our strengths for granted. So when you're thinking about what are other people thanking you for, what are they seeing in you, what do they comment about you and your work or expressing gratitude to you? Yeah, that's my question.
You know what, people often thank me because I see them. Like I see them. Like literally I can be in a conversation for 20 minutes and I already know this is what you're supposed to be doing. Not this over here, not this, over this, but this. And I can see it, and I see how the pieces come together, and I can see how the unpresentable parts of their life, the things that they think are the failures or the obstacles or the things that should be shame. I'm like, oh, no. This is why you're going to get paid for that. Like, this is why, like, I can pull the pieces. I can see the narrative. And then I can see the fastest way to the cash. Like what's, because there's lots of ways to be able to make money. There's lots of ways to be able to do whatever it is you want to do, right? But what's the way that's going to work for you? Just because there's lots of ways doesn't mean that they all work for you. So people thank me because they're like, you saw that.
Yeah.
That's exactly, like, it resonates. Like I can just, I pull those pieces together. But more than that, I think all of us need validation. We need validation that our life and our experiences matter. And that if we're going to put ourselves out there in a career or a business, that it means something, that we are a part of the marketplace equation. And I'm just able to see that for people. And I call myself, you're the Dean of Joy. I'm the make believer. I can make you believe in yourself.
Yeah, I love it. I
can make you believe in yourself. I think that's what people thank me for. Because they already know that it's there, but sometimes you have to have someone validate and see even what you might not see. Or so that's one. But then the other thing I think is, I see the value of what you bring. Most times we undervalue who we are. We undervalue our personality, our quirks. We're going to have one of the interviews with one of the thought leaders on personal branding. He talks about working your quirks, like how to work your quirks. And I see the value in that. And I can put price tags on that, like, oh no, we're charging way too little for this. So we got to charge more. Or people don't recognize that, man, the marketplace would want to pay for who I am, not just what I do. And I can see that. So I can see the clarity. So I think they thank me for that. But then they also thank me because I can put a value on that, which is oftentimes higher than the value they may put on themselves.
Yeah, it sounds like you see their strengths and you help bring those strengths to the world and have the world value, but have the person value their strengths. And again, oftentimes when I ask somebody, what's one thing that somebody tells you you're really good at? What's one of your strengths? Oftentimes they do undervalue their own strengths, or they take them for granted because they don't realize that they're their strengths. So that you're seeing them, I think that is huge. It is.
What's hard for us when we're thinking about, because you just said it, two things. One, oftentimes other people can see and appreciate our value more so than we can. Like usually if our value is at an 8, we're seeing it at like a 5,
Right.
We're not always the best judge of what we do well, or, strengths or whatnot. But I think it's important to really connect to that. It's really important to be able to connect and figure out, what do I really, what are people saying about me? And then knowing that and accepting that. And once you accept it, then you can figure out how to get paid for it. So for instance, I've always, for as long as I can remember, had this interest and passion and purpose and da-da-da. But as an engineer, as a management consultant, as a senior corporate person, I thought that was so hokey. Like, who is going to pay for some passion and purpose? And, you might want to write a book and get $10 for it, but that's it, right? And so I ran from this path for so long because in my mind, I didn't think it was that valuable to people. But as I've had conversations around how broken people can be when they're not doing work that they really love, the price that they're paying in their health, the price that they're paying in the connection to the people that they love, like, it took me a long time to really see that the marketplace needed me to step up. I'm not the only game in town, right? But they needed me to step up. And so as you're listening to these, this conversation as well, the marketplace needs you to step up for something that you might in your mind think is way too common or way too insignificant.
Right.
Just embrace the truth. Once you embrace the truth of, man, this is who I am, then we can find a way to the cash. But unless you're willing to own that, you can always be confused, right? So
it's finding out the tragic gap and kind of putting yourself and your strengths into it. So speaking of that, one of the things, Renessa, that a student recently asked me, she says, does the Dean of Joy ever get sad? And the easy answer to that question is yes, to be authentic and vulnerable, and that we hold both the joy and sadness of this one wild and precious life. So another question that you have, and you mentioned this idea of brokenness just a minute ago. What are the things that you see in the world that really draw you in terms of seeing whether it's injustice or seeing a tragic gap or seeing something that you're like, you know what, my heart is being called forward. I see some of these gaps in our world. And let's face it, we know we're living in a broken world right now, and that people's strengths and passions and the gifts that they have are definitely needed. So when you think about it in that context, what are some of the things that you're thinking about in that area?
The things that pull at my heart, there are two, maybe three. That it just breaks my heart. The first is around education and ensuring that all kids have the ability to be educated, to be nourished, well nourished, like good food, healthy food. I just have this thing for children. And it breaks my heart. My husband is a middle school principal. So, and he's phenomenal at his job. He really, this is what he was, supposed to do. And he leads the top, middle school in his district. And I see the work behind the scenes, right? And at the same time, it breaks my heart that in a country that's so rich and wealthy, that our kids don't get educated well, and that there's this inequality around who gets great education and who doesn't, and the difference that it makes in the whole trajectory of their life. And so I know that I am always going to invest in people who are doing great work to educate kids and to give them the footing to be able to reach their full potential, to feed them, to clothe them, whatever it takes to make sure these kids have what they need to thrive. That's one. The second is sick kids. Like, I'm a St. Jude, I'm all about how do you help kids to be healthy? Because for me, it comes back to the sense of abundance. I think abundance, in education, abundance in health. And then with the elderly. Like, I firmly believe there's so much wisdom in the elderly. And if you're able to learn from them and take care of them and support them, like, there's just such a blessing that comes back to you to do that.
Oh, yeah.
The question is important, though. Back to the folks that are listening, because, again, this helps you to get a sense for legacy, purpose, meaning. But what's also interesting is that just because I may be interested in kids, in the welfare of kids, doesn't necessarily mean I should go and be a teacher, right? Or that I should go and open a daycare, right? So when you're thinking about the things that you want to influence or impact, you also get to ask, but can I see myself doing that as a vocation? Like, do I really, I'm not cut out for that. Like, I can go give a great talk for some kids, but I'm not cut out day to day, an educator. And so you have to ask yourself those questions, because that could be a part of your purpose. Because remember, we said purpose, mission, and all that are different. Purpose is, what am I about? Mission is the vehicle for how I go about that, right? My mission is what I'm doing right here with you. It's about getting this message out. You may find that when you answer that question for yourself, part of it has to do with your perfect work. But maybe part of it is, hey, you know what? I'm going to take my money and I'm going to make sure that I'm funding other people who are doing this. So then you don't get confused about whether or not you need to be doing that thing or not. So being able to distinguish in the question where it plays. Is this purpose for me? Is this mission for me? Or is this just something I like to do on the weekends, right? Or every So,
and I think you bring up such a great point that showing up in our mission and our purpose may look very differently based on our strengths, based on our aptitudes, I had there's a WashU alum named Brittany Packnett, who's very involved in the Black Lives Matter movement. She's also an executive at Teach for America. She spoke at WashU's campus a few years ago, and one of the students asked her a question she said, I feel guilty because I'm not being I'm not in the protest movement as much as I think I should be. That should thing again. And Brittany had a brilliant follow-up. She said, here's the thing. If people are doing their work, they shouldn't have time to be, criticizing other people's work, and your work may look very differently. So you can be an activist, you can work on policy, you can do direct service, you can be bringing the casserole, you can be doing all kinds of different work in a movement, whether that's around education, healthcare policies, immigration. So I think that's really important, especially for young people, but really for people of all ages. How do we bring our gifts forward? And I love what that question gets at. And I love that your questions have, there's depth and intention around those questions that lead you to those 4 questions that help you bring your purpose forward. So, thank you for developing those questions.
There's a point that you make in there that I think is really critical, because the purpose of some of these questions are so that we can connect the dots of who we are, right? So then we know where we're supposed to play. Because you're right, just using the activist example, right? I'm not an activist. Like, I believe very strongly on things, but you will rarely see me at a march with a sign, in the cold. However, I believe that what check can I write to this? Because there's power in, let me go ahead and make my coins and get my money together and go and fund, because I know that this is a force for good. This is an avenue, and these people are going and they're doing a great thing. That doesn't mean that I just write my check and sit on in the background. But I do believe that for me, I have an ability to earn. And so that gift, let me turn that around and figure out who I can support and fuel their cause, because hey, without the change and the coins,
resources,
that mission is going nowhere, right? So it's understanding with your strengths and your passions and your purpose and all that, where's the ideal role for you to play? That's where sweet spot comes in when we talk about those 4 questions. What do you do most, or what do you do best? What do you enjoy most? What's your story? And what's the market willing to pay for? That helps you find the sweet spot, so that in this big world of meaningful work, you figure out what's the role that I'm supposed to play. Because sometimes we can be on purpose, but the mission could be off. We could be in the right kind of sphere and environment, but we are in the wrong role to accomplish what we think we want to accomplish. So that's why the intersection and the integration of these questions becomes so important.
Well, let me ask you this. Are there any questions that I didn't ask you that you think are really critical? Because you have so many wonderful questions, and you and I we didn't rehearse this. We went complete organic and impromptu, and I loved it. But I want to make sure, especially since you have so many great questions.
I think, there's a couple questions that I would encourage folks to ask themselves. And what I think I'm going to do is just I'm going to put the list of questions up. So
great.
Download them. So the ones we didn't even get to, like literally I'm opening the kimono to the things that I talk about with my clients and the questions that they answer. And literally at the end of that series, they're like, this is what I want to do. There's one question, I think, and it has to do with pain and passion. Because oftentimes I believe that from our pain can come passion.
Yeah.
And if you can think back to painful situations that you've overcome, frustrations, challenges, you know, are you drawn to help people in similar ways? Like really begin to analyze. Can you do that through your job? Can you do that through your business? Because for me, finding my perfect work, finding passion, it was painful.
Yeah.
And I get that that's not everybody's circumstance. Some people, it's they don't find meaning in work. That's not how they get meaning, and it's totally fine. If you're listening to this conversation, you're probably someone who's wired where fulfillment and and achievement, all of that comes hand in hand. You don't want one without the other.
Right.
And so because it was such a painful process for me, physically, mentally, emotionally, figuring that out, it became a clue to what I was supposed to contribute in the world. And so I've had clients who have been in foster care, you know, for several years, and they began to realize that part of their mission was to go back and really make a difference in that space. Didn't mean that they were supposed to be a social worker, but it did mean that they were to influence in some way, right? And so you may want to think about, what's the pain in my life? You know, have I been abused? Have circumstances happened that can be a glimpse to where I'm supposed to make a difference in the world? And I think the other question is, what do you pay attention to? Like, what magazines do you read? What blogs do you read? What podcasts do you listen to? What television shows do you watch? Like, what are the things that you are just so naturally drawn to? Because that's a sign of where you can be a thought leader. So when we talk about getting highly paid to do work you love, that's part of getting highly paid to do work you love is being a thought leader in the space, not just the cog in the wheel, and a thought leader. Like Jill is in higher ed, but Jill and I met because she was speaking at a conference. Like, she's a thought leader. And there's lots of people who do her job all around the country, and they do the job and they just do the job. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
There is a difference in being a thought leader in the space, right? So when you pay attention to the things you pay attention to, those could be clues to the things that you have opinions about, especially when you pay attention and there's a sense of like envy and jealousy that may come up, like, I could have said that. Or you're listening to some guru or some person on the television, they're talking, I say that all the time. Like, I could have, or you read a book and it's like, well, I could have, you know, even in those moments of less than productive emotion, like sometimes that's a sign to, you need to get your hand in the ring then and go put thought leadership out there.
Right.
And like for me, I'm always, you know, the Oprah magazines and all of those things about living your best life. And so when she came out with the whole slogan about living your best life, I was like, well, damn. I mean,
well, dang.
Okay, you know? I couldn't figure out a tagline from my own business because it was gone, you know?
No, I think that's great. I think it's paying attention to that. And also the one thing I will say is sometimes with women in particular, we think we have to be quote unquote, you know, qualified. And all of us are qualified in terms of coming forward in you're qualified in your strengths. Yeah. Let's put it that way. You are qualified in your authenticity. Yeah. You don't need to have like letters behind your name. I mean, you need to have been thoughtful about it. And like, I love what you said. You need to be paying attention to it. But we are all qualified.
Yep, your story qualified.
That's it. That's it.
I think Christy Dosh said this. So I want to give credit to her. She does a lot of work in publicity and all of that. But she says when she's teaching people how to go out and maybe pitch themselves for, you know, magazines or TV or podcasts or whatever, she's like, what makes you an expert is your story. Like,
love it.
The flavor that you bring to the table, how it happened for you, because there are folks who are listening in, y'all want to be speakers or coaches or whatever. Yeah. We could talk about the same thing. Your story is going to resonate with your perfect audience differently than my story will resonate with them. And so it's not about, well, did I get this credential or did I get this?
Right.
And degrees and all that's great and it's fine and there's value in it. But what I'm saying is, to Jill's point, the whole what qualifies me to step into this space, the story already qualifies you.
Yes.
Those 4 questions, the 3 questions actually, what do you do best? What do you enjoy most? What's the mark, or what do you enjoy best? What do you do most? What's your story? That's your qualification.
Yeah.
And then you just go figure out what's the market willing to pay for. Who's going to cut the check for this? And then we figure, and there's branding and positioning and all that goes into it. But the point of this conversation is for us to unpack the layers so that you can begin to get honest about the stuff that you think, hand on heart, these are the whispers.
Yeah.
This is what God's telling me. This is what my spirit says that I'm supposed to do. Let's get honest about that. Then we can figure out the path to the catch. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I love it. And I love, I call it the cosmic Post-it note.
Yeah.
The cosmic Post-it note of your life. And then it goes back to valuing your story. Valuing your story and valuing who you are to bring that into the world. And there's a great, you probably know the poet Mary Oliver. And I think poetry helps get me into this space of reflection. And also music does the same thing for me. But she says, one of her most famous poems, her last line of the summer day, she says, "Tell me, what do you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?"
Yes.
Yeah, tell me. And so that's another great question. But your questions are so beautiful and they're so thoughtful, and they help us bring forward that hard work and that heart work.
Awesome.
So
well,
thank
that
you.
being said, I think that's a perfect place for us to hit pause. So what I'm going to do, and I hadn't thought about doing this, but I'm going to post these questions because there's questions we didn't get to that are equally as pretty awesome. So I'm going to post these questions and you can just download them. Literally, sometimes we think figuring this out is so complicated. It is not complicated. It's actually quite simple, just not easy. You know, it's the hard work and the hard work. But literally, these are the questions that I walk people through, and they fill them out, they get honest, and then they give them to me because I work magic, and I can be like, oh, this is what it all means, ooh, right? But I'm going to give them to you so that you can answer them for yourself.
That's wonderful.
And just and be honest, like put the cash to the side, put the monetization to the side, put the fears to the side, and just be like, here's what I think, here's what I'm seeing, here's what I'm hearing. And if you can start from that place of authenticity, then the other pieces start to come together, the strategizing. And again, I'm not just dream big and the money will come. No, you dream big and you ain't got a plan, you'd be broke. The point here is let's just get honest and let's get authentic, right?
Right.
So Jill, thank you so much.
Oh my gosh, thank you. Talk about joy. This has been so much fun. Thank you.
Yes. And I wanted you guys, she's in St. Louis, which if y'all know in the wintertime is kind of crazy. And so she has taken out her time in her day and it's nice and snowy and all that good stuff. And we're just so grateful that you've shared.
And thank you for the invitation.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
That being said, on behalf of Jill and myself, we just want to wish you the absolute best, encourage you in this wild and wonderful life that you have, and we'll see you next time.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.